Hello, this is Jessica Wright, and this is my presentation on differentiated instruction. So, what is differentiated instruction? By definition, it is an approach by which teachers can adjust their curriculum and instruction to best fit the needs of all students. Not every student learns the same, not everyone completes the same activities in order to gather knowledge. So differentiated instruction allows for the teachers to switch things up so that they can reach all students and not just select parts of their classes. It is also a framework for implementing strategies that are mostly research-based, such as employing an effective classroom management strategies, assessing their readiness, grouping students for instruction, teaching to the student's proximal zone of development. Research shows that strategies used to differentiate instructional and assessment tasks for English language learners, gifted students, and struggling learners are also effective for other students in the classroom. In one study, a classroom who had differentiated instruction for a reading program ended up obtaining more skills from that particular program than did students who did not have differentiated instruction. Teachers who differentiate also often use a variety of different tools, a variety of different ways to engage their students. They make sure that they create meaningful and engaging lesson plans. They use assessments and results to adjust the instruction as needed. They employ different grouping formats, such as whole class, small group, and peer-on-peer, and use flexible grouping. General principles for this is ongoing assessment, meaning before, during, and after a unit, you will assess your students' needs and tweak instruction if needed. I apologize for this fly. Flexible grouping, as I said before, is small groups, whole groups, peer pairs. These are general principles for differentiated instruction. So, I want to try differentiated instruction. How do teachers differentiate instruction? There are a lot of different ways you can do this. Importantly, you need to know your students. You need to know what level they're on, what they're interested in, and so forth. Then you can differentiate your instruction methods, such as, are you going to teach this with a short video? Are you going to teach this in a lecture? Are you going to teach this with interactive PowerPoints? How are you going to teach this information? Then you will be differentiating the content, process, and/or product, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. And then you evaluate and you grade student performance. Knowing your students, apologies for that. So as I said earlier, knowing your students is very important. You need to know their readiness, what they know, what they don't know. You can do this through informal tests, you can do this through formal tests, work samples, previous work done, their academic record, and self-report measures. Their interest. You can gauge how interested a child or student is a lot of different ways. You can discuss their interests, you can have them write a journal entry about themselves, you can take an interest inventory to find out what it is that really engages their interest. You can also monitor to see how they perform in icebreaker activities within the classroom. The learning profile is basically the student's preferred method of learning new information. You can find this out by administering a questionnaire or an infographic or a skill inventory such as we used for interest, or you can just observe during class and kind of pick and choose which students respond to what method better. Differentiating content, process, and/or product. So, The content is your basic knowledge and the knowledge and skills that the student needs to master. Your process is activities that the students use to master these concepts and the content. And the product is the method they use to demonstrate their learning. For example, if you're going to differentiate the content, you can have tiered content, you can have a variety of materials, different presentation styles, scaffolding. Learning contracts and compacting can help them with their content knowledge. For the process, activities could be learning centers. They could be interactive educational games, such as our school district uses Lexia for core reading and Symphony or Zern or a myriad of other different games for math. You could also use graphic organizers, interactive journals, manipulatives, anything that really helps them connect the dots and make the pathways that they need to make in their brain. For the product, demonstrating the learning, you could do many different things. Some students really perform well for tests. Some students have stage fright and they freeze up. It's not that they don't know the information, it's just not the way that they're comfortable demonstrating to you that they know the information. So it could be a verbal report, it could be a written report, it could be some kind of project that they put together, some kind of organizer that you can use to gauge how well they know the information that you've been teaching them. Evaluating and grading student performance. Obviously, we grade our students, it's very important, but we need to know that we can't grade on a curve. You have to evaluate their performance and assign their grades. And we need to keep in mind that some students need multiple tries at attempting mastery. And then we're going to touch on group grades and missing work. To evaluate performance, there are a lot of different things that we can do. You can use a rubric, which allows the students to have a clear and concise outline of what is expected from them within their project. You can use portfolios, or you can use a self-assessment to gauge how much knowledge the child has gained. For assigning grades, we need to consider three factors. We need to consider achievement, growth, and habits. So how much they have achieved, how much their knowledge has grown, and the different kind of habits that they display during class. For grading, pre-assessments should probably not be graded. They don't have a lot of information, so it's not a true reflection of the knowledge they have gained from your unit or lesson to grade them beforehand. When it comes to multiple attempts at mastery, we need to make sure that we are giving them credit every time they attempt, because especially if their scores are getting better, because we can tell their grade will reflect their mastery level. For extra credit or bonus points, if we give it just because, or with a question that isn't due to the content, it's likely to just inflate the grade instead of actually reflecting what they've learned. If the bonus point or the extra credit is based off of content, is a question dealing with the content, then it would be okay to award those bonus points. For missing work, a lot of teachers actually use, instead of a 0, which can bring their grade down drastically and doesn't exactly reflect how much they've learned, most teachers do 50% or 60% just to show that the child does not have proficient knowledge in this particular content. How do teachers prepare their students in classroom for differentiated instruction? So when it comes to making the best of our classroom, we really need to take into account the floor space that we have, our bulletin boards or our wall space, and our material storage. And for communication with students and adults, we'll touch on different ways to do that here in a second. Floor space, bulletin board, wall space, material storage, these are all super important. So you need to take into account what your classroom will look like and how it will work. For traditional instruction, the teacher's desk is normally placed at the front of the room in front of the students so that the students can see the teacher instructing them. For differentiated instruction, you really need to kind of put the teacher's desk back out of the way so that you have room It's definitely more student-led than it is teacher-led. So put that teacher's desk out of the way towards the back of the room. It's still accessible should the students need help, and obviously we still need to use our own workspaces. For desks, you want to make sure that they're situated in such a way that you can stand and monitor your children. There needs to be clear paths so that you can walk around, see what they're doing, and be accessible to any help that any student may need. It may be a good idea to have a table or a desk, like a 4 to 8 pod of desks, so that students can go and work independently should they need to, especially children who may have a harder time working with their peers or may just want to work on something by themselves and have their focus completely tuned in. You can have tables to promote collaboration. You can have U-shaped tables to promote conversations between students. That's all really super important. You might even use area rugs for younger children, and just really set up your room in such a way that will work for different students doing different activities and still allow yourself to be accessible and be able to monitor what they're doing. So you also need to identify the best place for material storage. If you're using it a lot, make sure that it's someplace that's very accessible. Maybe towards the front of the classroom, maybe close to the workstations, wherever it is that you use those manipulatives or materials the most. For those that you don't use very often that are more seasonal, put them in an out-of-the-way place so that they don't cause a hazard when you're walking and there's not any surplus of clutter throughout your classroom. For bulletin board and wall space, put up helpful tidbits, classroom rules. You can do procedures for different activities. You can do hang cards, high quality samples, you can post rubrics, you can post information about assignments. Just utilize those to the best of your ability and make that knowledge accessible for all of your students. It might also be a good idea to keep at least one wall blank for students who have a hard time focusing with a lot of different stimuli running around. So, communicating with students and parents. You need to let your students know that this is not going to look like anything they've ever really dealt with before if they're coming from a traditional instructional environment. It's going to look differently. It is more student-led than it is teacher-led. The students really have ownership over their learning and how they get it done in this kind of a situation. So you may spend some time asking them, is everyone good at the same thing? No, of course not. We all have our different strengths and we all have the things that we wish we were better at. We also need to really go through, is everyone the same? Should I teach everyone the same way? What will classroom instruction be like? Let them know all of these different things that will be changing. How can I best tend to your needs as a student? And let them know that fair doesn't always mean same. Fair means that everyone has everyone gets what they need to obtain the same knowledge. For communicating with parents, written materials need to be provided in a native language if possible, when possible. Use simple language and not a whole lot of professional jargon. Make sure that it's appropriate for the reading level, and make sure that you attend to those parents' needs as soon as you possibly can. For face-to-face or personal interactions, you need to take into account the cultural background of the family and to make sure that you are not crossing any lines. There are no taboos that you are uncovering. Be sensitive to their different communication styles, and always make sure that you are sensitive to their work schedules, such as one parent might work the second shift and need to sleep through the day or what have you. So, at my school, some common practices are lectured instruction. It's not a very good example of differentiated learning because it only tailors to one specific set of our students. It does not take into account those who need to write things down. It does not take into account those who need more visual learning. It can be made better by breaking it up into smaller sessions or using engaging activities such